Hello and welcome to Just Onside. I hope you're all doing fantastically well. I'm not, but I'm going to tell you why later on. But firstly, OS is in familiar territory. Seems that you're back from Germany. So how are you, OS?
I'm doing good, thanks, Ayub. Got back an hour and a half ago. No, feel good about myself. Not too tired, so that's good. Always good to come back at a reasonable hour. You did mention that you'll tell us why you're not feeling so good later on, but let's just cut to the chase, Ayub. I did follow the game last night when I was in Cologne last night. Stoke against Leeds. I'll give you the floor quickly.
Absolutely steaming. I'll make it quick because I'm still livid. It's last season. There was a common theme. Every time I talked about Leeds, the name Bamford popped up quite often, quite frequently. Yesterday, a turgid game, but this is what happens on a wet Tuesday night. Oh, well, what? Wet Wednesday night at Stoke. So it was a really poor game, not a great game, but I still fancied with the quality that we have that we were always going to edge it. Got a penalty towards the 80th minute. And the thing that I did not want to see, I saw. It was Patrick Bamford. This guy who is in my opinion a fraud, an absolute fraud of a centre forward. He's a disgrace. He really is a disgrace. I've never approved of players being booed and really vilified. He's one player that I make an exception. He is absolutely, to me, he's
That's a bit
been.
harsh, Ayub. Come on.
But if you're a Leeds fan, I wouldn't sort of say he was the one that cost us our place in the Premier League, but he was instrumental. There was a lot of fault to go around, but ultimately, as a striker, you have the opportunity to maybe save the team. He missed two penalties, crucial penalties that were defining moments in the game. He missed an opportunity against Leicester. It was the last kick of the game. He scores, we get 3 points instead of the one. I think in total it was I'd say about 9 or 10 points that he genuinely cost us. Those 10 points were in the Premier League. So he's a player that many Leeds fans are not in favour with. Yesterday was a classic example of ego. A penalty is given. He's on the pitch. Our penalty taker, Puro, is off. And I blame Farke as well, because really, as a coach, you must have, if your main penalty taker isn't there, you've got to have a list, surely. But apparently there wasn't. Somerville, I think, had the ball. He's taken the ball off Somerville and said, no, I'm going to take it. And then we all knew what was going to happen. He's missed the two penalties previous to this.
Yeah.
One was saved, it was feeble. One was just he didn't hit the target. And I just knew it. I couldn't watch the game, but I was following it on Twitter. It was a live feed, so it was pretty much instantaneous. And I knew that when I refreshed the page, I knew it was either going to be saved or missed. And on cue, he misses from Phil Hay of the Athletic. And it's a good job you're in Cologne. In fact, you probably might have heard me in Cologne. I was absolutely livid. And then I knew what was going to happen. It was inevitable. He misses. 2 minutes later, Stoke
Yeah.
score. They win the game. And really, this is. I hope that this man never ever puts on a shirt and plays for Leeds again. Seriously, I would. If I was anything to do with Leeds, I'd pay him out his contract and I'd say, "On your way, pal. Close the door on your way out." Because this is unacceptable. This is a man who, if he had any decency, what he would have done is, look, my confidence is low in terms of penalty taking. Even though I'm a centre forward, I'm a former England international. Somerville, you're full of confidence, you take it. But no, this is a guy who's not scored for a long time. This is a guy that he knows fans are on his back. He thought, right, I'll score a goal. It gives me a little bit of confidence. It shuts up some of the fans. You don't do that as a centre forward. Even though you gave a stat, we talked about penalties. You said that the percentage rate of scoring penalties is 80-odd%. Not when it comes to Bamford. It's about 40-odd% with that man. So still steaming. Thankfully, in the Championship, the games come think of fast. We're playing Huddersfield, big Yorkshire derby. We win. Everything is okay again. But really, the problem is Ipswich and Leicester at the moment are winning machines. They are not losing any games. They win every game. The gap between us and the second place is about 11 points. So that's why, again, there's more rage. You can't afford to drop points, and if you've got Bamford in the squad, in the team, it's almost like there's a handicap you've got. So that's the reason why I'm fuming.
Tell us how you really feel, Ayub. I mean, yeah, he's missed his last. He's missed the two before this,
Yeah.
and I've not seen the penalty, but I heard he skied it considerably.
They're still waiting for the ball to drop.
I heard it was quite the woeful penalty. And you're right, he'd just come on to the pitch, hadn't he?
Yeah.
I did read the report. And then Sod's Law, a really difficult own goal as well, in incredible circumstances. So, I mean, they came up with a result at the weekend when it looked quite desperate. They needed probably a draw from yesterday just to keep some momentum going. Difficult. But, I mean, when I saw it was Bamford who missed the penalty, I was like, they should make for an interesting introduction for the podcast. But anyway, like you said, games come thick and fast. Let's get back on the horse.
Right. Okay. So that's we're talking. I mean, that's about rubbish. Chrissy Sutton was talking about something at the other end of the scale, quality, top quality, and he talked about Mo Salah, Liverpool being the best player. Was it the best player or the best forward Liverpool have ever had?
The best player Liverpool have had.
Right. Massive comment. I mean, Chris Sutton does. I mean, I must confess, he does talk a lot of rubbish. On this one, it's an interesting topic. I'm a huge fan of Mo Salah. I love Liverpool as a football club. So, what's your thoughts on Mo Salah being? Is he the best player Liverpool have ever had? He's got a fantastic record.
The statement that he put out, Chris Sutton, I think it was on the podcast or what have you, which is always an interesting listen, was that Mo Salah is Liverpool's greatest ever Premier League player. So in the end, basing that off his kind of statement, ultimately there's only one player against whom he's got that competition, right? So the question is, it's between him and Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard, local boy, 17 years at the club. We all know what he achieved at Liverpool Football Club, one club man in the end. So I think, look, when you hear it, it sounds quite egregious because Mo Salah, this is his 7th season for Liverpool Football Club. So when you're kind of critiquing it or comparing it, you have to look at, in a sense, the individual statistics, the individual honours, kind of club honours and what have you. So the first thing I think to say is that they are two very different players, right? Steven Gerrard, powerhouse. Many of his peers talk about his athletic ability, but in terms of goals, assists, he's had some good seasons, some not so good seasons. But again, it's central midfield, right? So it's very much in his prime. He was box to box. He's had many games where he's kind of defined those and put his imprint on the games, which is what you ask from the very big players. So the question is Mo Salah Liverpool's greatest ever Premier League player? And I will give you my call at the end. But let's just go through some of the quick stats, Ayub, if we may. So he's got 144 Premier League goals compared to Gerrard's 121. But those have come in 227 games compared to Gerrard's 504. In terms of minutes per goal, that's 134 compared to 310 for Gerrard. Again, being fair to Steven Gerrard, these are two very different positions, right? And two different kind of eras as well. In terms of the formations, if you remember Gerrard, the bulk of his career he played arguably at times, especially under Rafa Benitez, just behind the striker, 4-4-1-1, very compact, very tight, very kind of tactical. I think now you see very much the era of the kind of 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1, and Salah's played all of those games pretty much as right winger. 194 goals total for Mo Salah for Liverpool Football Club. He's only third. He's only behind Roger Hunt and Ian Rush. He won't be catching those two in terms of all-time goals for Liverpool. Ian Rush, absolute legend, 336 goals for Liverpool in all competitions. So 194 to 336, I think safe to say that record is safe. 186 goals for Steven Gerrard, so now Salah's overtaken him in terms of all-time goals for Liverpool. In terms of assists, Gerrard's got 100 assists in the Premier League compared to Mo Salah's 68. But again, when you think about the number of games, Mo Salah, I think, has got an assist every 3.5 games in the league. whereas Gerrard's got an assist every 5 games in the league. 44 Champions League goals for Mo Salah compared to 14 goals for Steven Gerrard. Again, you would probably give the nod there to Mo Salah, even accounting for the kind of positional kind of difference and what have you. Do you then kind of look at the team honours, right, in terms of Premier League? Now, the one glaring one is, it would be kind of obvious not to start with this one, is the Premier League. Liverpool, for many a year, coveted the Premier League title. The famous words from Sir Alex Ferguson when he came down from Scotland, which is that he wanted to knock Liverpool off their perch, which he duly did over the span of kind of 2 decades. And in the end, Liverpool finally in 2019-2020 finally landed the one trophy that they'd long coveted, the Premier League, and that was one that obviously eluded Steven Gerrard. Is that a knock that we put on Gerrard's resume? I think overall it probably isn't. I think in terms of the totality of his legacy, but ultimately that was the one title that he wanted, obviously famously that one year where they fell just shy, I believe, when Brendan Rodgers was leading them. That was the one where perhaps they came the closest, I would say, under with Gerrard, who was a slightly different player at that stage of his career as well. They've both won FA Cups. Mo Salah's won 1 FA Cup compared to Gerrard's 2. He's won 2 FA Cups, which we'll come on to, because one of those, again, he is a very kind of a big defined game, let's say, by Steven Gerrard, when you think famously the goals against West Ham. League Cups, 1 for Salah, 2 for Steven Gerrard. Champions Leagues, famously, obviously, Gerrard had his major night in Istanbul in 2005. Mo Salah obviously had his when they beat Spurs in the Champions League final in Madrid. So that was 1 Champions League trophy each. However, Salah's got 2 runners-up. In terms of 2 finals that they've lost to Real Madrid. Gerrard obviously lost a couple of years after winning against AC Milan. They lost to AC Milan, if you remember. I think the final was played in Greece. I'm not going to count some of the Super Cups and what have you. I think those are the main trophies. Gerrard had won the one Europa Cup as well, or UEFA Cup, shall we say. So yeah, I think when you look at kind of the individual honours, I think when you look at the time spent, it's actually quite... I was surprised when I went into this kind of debate. I thought, what was my first instinct? And normally your first instinct gives you a view. And I thought, well, I'm not sure. I was kind of leaning towards Gerrard still, just because of the time in terms of, I think for 2 reasons. One, the time spent. I mean, that's 504 Premier League games. That's a long period, 17 years at the club. But I also then thought to myself, Steven Gerrard probably has more defining moments than Salah. Now, that doesn't mean that I would add any more weight to that. It's just when I do think moments, I think, right, what can I remember from the players? And when I think Gerrard, I think about Istanbul 2005, when you're 3-0 down at half-time. He gets the first goal, the header past Dida. He wins the penalty, which Xabi Alonso puts in on the rebound. So you're thinking these big games, big moments. He puts his imprint on the final. You think about West Ham, that goal from long range in terms of delivering that trophy. You think about Olympiacos, the famous one. So there's many a game where you think about all these moments that Gerrard's produced, and many, many more. When I think about Salah, and this is no criticism, because I don't think moments outweigh consistency. I want consistency over anything else. Is that when you think about moments, you think, well, he's got the penalty against Spurs, but I mean, it's a penalty in terms of in the Champions League final. You think about that long distance goal he scored against Chelsea in the league when he piled it top corner. I think when you think about Salah, what you think about is this kind of sheer ruthlessness and consistency that he has game in, game out. And I think that's what you think about in terms of, especially when with regards to his consistent statistics. So I think when I look at all of that, I think to myself, actually, I think Mo Salah just edges it. I think Liverpool fans, if you ask them, obviously I don't think they see it as a competition. They revere both players in their own right. I don't think they see it as, oh, he's better, because I think both players ended, I wouldn't say ended, but Steven Gerrard, let's say he'd ended on bad terms with Liverpool or something or the other. Some fans would have been turned off to say, oh, Salah's better than Gerrard and what have you. I think both a set of fans, a knowledgeable fan base, appreciates that they've had two absolute legends of the game. Now, when you think about Liverpool's all-time players, most regard King Kenny as the greatest Liverpool player of all time, with Steven Gerrard second, Mo Salah third, maybe Suarez fourth, John Barnes you think about some of the other rush maybe there afterwards. They've had some unbelievable players. I think right now, I think Mo Salah, when you delve into the statistics and you delve into his sheer consistency and the fact that he's delivered, and I'll say he's delivered, but a Premier League title, you'd have to give him the nod. And I think if they land one more Premier League title, I think it's the Premier League, I would say, I think then it's a slam dunk. I think to have delivered 2 Premier League trophies and just a few more quick ones, Ayub. He's won the Golden Boot 3 times. Obviously, Gerrard, I wouldn't expect him to win the Golden Boot, but that's still Golden Boot 3 times. He was Football Writers Player of the Year twice to Gerrard's once, PFA Player of the Year twice to Gerrard's once, Team of the Year 3 times compared to Gerrard's 8, which shows Gerrard's sheer consistency and perhaps longevity. But interestingly, Gerrard's never won the Premier League Player of the Year, whereas Salah's won it once. So yeah, I think when you look at the totality, Gerrard, in terms of longevity, there's absolutely no two ways about it. But I think in terms of sheer ruthlessness, consistency, in terms of how vital he is, not saying Gerrard wasn't, I think Salah may have just about turned the corner and may have become Liverpool's greatest Premier League player ever. And I think if he wins one more Premier League title, I think the debate would pretty much be settled.
That's very fair. That really is that's a good way of doing it, because this is always complicated when people are comparing who's the best, whether it's from different sides or whether it's from the same side, from the same club. It's complicated because I always say that there has to be a criteria. Plus, also, there is a danger where it looks as if you're criticising or maybe, I suppose, devaluing the other players. It's certainly not. And I think the way that you explained it, it certainly didn't come across that way. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I mean, I was a massive fan of Steven Gerrard. I really did. I mean, he epitomised to me what a captain should be. It helped that Liverpool was his boyhood club. I'm not sure whether he was an Everton supporter as a kid, but certainly he embodies what Liverpool is all about. He's obviously played for the club from a very, very young age. And I think the point that you made was absolutely, for me, key. Why I consider him to be the best Liverpool player ever. It's those defining moments, those key moments. It almost became, if there were a goal behind, you just almost looked at Steven Gerrard that he will somehow do something. He'll either make a long-busting run, score a fantastic goal, goad his players into perhaps just creating some more energy, just to do something. And that was, for me, Steven Gerrard, that he was always, whenever you felt there was a special moment needed, Captain Marvel would come, would do something. So they're both amazing players. And I think it not just the longevity of Steven Gerrard, I think it was the fact that he was not just somebody that played 500 games. It was every game meant everything to him. It was always a case of he's leaving nothing behind. And I think he inspired other players around him. He was a proper captain. I think sometimes it's just a token gesture. He was a proper captain. He was vocal on the pitch. He led by example. He talked to players when they had to be talked to, and he was a winner. He was a winner. And it's sad that famous slip or infamous slip, a lot of those who perhaps aren't Liverpool fans always deride Liverpool or Gerrard on that. And it's a shame. It's one of football's tragedies, I would say, that Steven Gerrard never had the opportunity to lift the Premier League, because it would have been so fitting, and it would have just meant that he had all the trophies a player of his caliber would deserve. But wonderful way that you explained it in terms of who you think is the best player. I'd go for Gerrard. I think you make a very strong argument for Salah, and I think perhaps if they do win the league this year, I think nobody can question. Even I would have to say yes, Mo Salah. But at the moment, for me, in terms of the careers that they've had, in Mo Salah's case, it's obviously still ongoing. My man is Stevie G.
Yeah, I mean, look, I tried to get to this kind of conclusion, and I can't disagree with anything that you've said in terms of the moments. Whilst you were speaking, I was thinking about, again, some of the other moments that, to be fair, Mo Salah's had. You think about that solo goal he scored against Manchester City when he had that kind of turn in the inside right channel, turn Laporta right foot past Ederson into the side netting. 3 times golden boot. He was scoring, it felt like, every single week. He will go down as one of the most kind of dominant players in Premier League history. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see how long he plays for Liverpool. 17 years compared to 6.5. Gerrard against Salah. You think about the time he spent for Roma and Fiorentina, just in terms of his Serie A statistics, Ayub, 35 goals, 22 assists in 81 games. I mean, it's incredible. And when you saw him play for Chelsea, you would never have thought, and this is the most amazing thing about footballers. You'll get some footballers that have this mentality where they'll just develop and work, and in terms of his strength and fitness. And same goes for Gerrard. Those players who reach, as I often call them, the 1% of the 1%, there's a certain extra level of commitment that they're willing to put in to kind of stay at the very top. If you look at Salah in terms of his physique, but just in terms of his regimen, talk about diet. I think it was Harvey Elliott talking about how at the start of the season or maybe last season when he was speaking to Mo Salah about what he eats and when he eats it and how it had a profound impact on him. And I just think there are times with Mo, because with Mo Salah, that before we thought of him just as a slightly kind of selfish right winger who'd make the difference in terms of goals and what have you. I think what you've seen over perhaps the last 12 to 18 months is that he's very cultured. He's got goal contribution. I was really often a goal or assist contribution, as we've spoken about, for like 15 continuous games. I'm going to give him the Spurs one as well. But you know, he's shown that he's got that kind of ability to get a lovely assist. I mean, we've seen that for Diaz in the Chelsea game. We saw that with Diaz for the Spurs game, but a few others, right? Against Newcastle as well for the Nunes. He's got more strings to his bow. And I think as much as Gerrard, in terms of that defensive and offensive athleticism and commitment and tackling and all-encompassing central midfielder, which perhaps suited that era. Now it's perhaps a bit more technical, a bit more kind of methodical, a bit more slower at times in terms of the tactical nous that many teams play with because of the influence of great coaches and what have you, and just football develops, right? It just evolves into something different. I just think Mo Salah perhaps is, I wouldn't say underappreciated, but I think sometimes his sheer numbers, many forget about. It's like last year when people were raving about Saka being perhaps the best right wing in the league, and then you look at Salah's numbers and they're still there. Whether they had the same impact for Liverpool in a difficult season, question mark. But this year he started off great, hasn't he? He started off really well. He's back to his absolute best in a Liverpool team that looks lively going forward, and it'll be interesting to see what this season brings. I think we both agree one more big trophy this year, and it has to be the Premier League as they're out in the Champions League. I think that would settle it for sure. But I think even right now, in terms of the time spent, kind of like for like, if you look at the assists per kind of game, minutes per game, minutes per goal, and all the rest of it, I think Salah is ahead. Again, different players, I get it, but I think his sheer consistency in a league where ultimately the hardest thing to do is still put the ball in the back of the net. I think I would give him just a nod. To be fair,
good stuff. I know there's plenty of Liverpool supporters who watch this podcast, so we'd like to know your thoughts. Is it Salah? Is it John Barnes? I mean, because that's the thing, you see, because at the moment, obviously, it was between Gerrard and Mo Salah, but there are others who perhaps would think, you mentioned King Kenny. So I'm going for Gerrard, my man. I'd like to know what your thoughts are, guys. So please put a comment in and let us know exactly what you think. Who is the best ever player for Liverpool?
One more quick comment. In the Premier League era, it's really only between those two. I mean, you could make a kind of third argument for Luis Suarez in terms of the time. Many regard him as the greatest talent, perhaps, that Liverpool have had in the Premier League.
I'm not having that. Just on that, I'm not having. I think we obviously have a predominantly an audience which is the Premier League is all they know. But
Chris
as
Sutton's
Gary
comment
Lineker,
was about the
yeah,
Premier League.
no, but Gary Lineker did sort of say, I think sometimes when we're talking about best, we sometimes have to be fair because football didn't wasn't invented in 1992. So sometimes if it's a best, maybe it might be players from a previous generation. But it's interesting. It always is. These conversations are always interesting. So drop your comments. Let's hear what your thoughts are. Right, just before we talk about the Premier League, interesting developments. It's a topic that keeps on popping its ugly head. Betting, footballers betting. Today it's been announced that I think Tonali has got a 10-month ban for betting. I'm not sure exactly what type of betting he was doing. Always, I'm sure you'll avail us quickly as to what he's done, what type of betting, and what your thoughts on his 10-month ban is.
Well, I think in terms of the circumstances of this case, there's a lot more that will come out, which is, I mean, the ban dropped today. So there will be more that comes out in terms of who was involved. Obviously, this has been a developing story, Ayub, over the last maybe couple of weeks when they were removed, Tonali and Zaniolo from Aston Villa were removed from the Italy squad, if you remember, in the just before this international break, right, when they were due to play England as well in the second game, let's say. So they were removed as part of the kind of ongoing investigation and what have you, as the news was about to break, let's say. And it would see, so they have been betting on matches that whilst he was at AC Milan, I think whilst he was at Brescia as well. More details will come out, Ayub, out of this. Obviously, once the bans are given, there'll be perhaps a written statement. Whereas in the previous cases that we've had in this country, Ayub, with Ivan Toney famously last year, or I say last year, but as the season came to an end last season, and then obviously Harry Toffolo at Nottingham Forest, for some of you who will have followed that case as well, that was obviously given, or those bans were imposed by the English FA, whereas this particular ban was imposed by the Italian FA, or the Italian kind of governing body and what have you. And obviously that has far-reaching implications for Newcastle United because he switched clubs this summer as part of a £55 million deal. And you will remember your badge made a point as to the fact that Newcastle picked him up relatively on the cheap, according to Badge. And I remember that comment this week because there's a lot of skepticism about what AC Milan knew and didn't know about this case and what have you. And I think there will be perhaps some legal implications. I think Newcastle law, there's already some noises that they'll be looking to see if there's any legal redress for them in terms of what AC Milan knew and didn't know, because this betting took place whilst he was not a Newcastle player. So in terms of the details about how many bets and whether he was betting on games he was involved in, I think there's already acceptance that there were bets made with regards to games played by AC Milan and Brescia and what have you, but I think more details will follow. My view on this, I mean, Roy Hodgson called it a tragedy in terms of the 10-month ban. So he was given an 18-month ban, 8 of which were suspended. So he will receive a 10-month ban, which means that he will miss the rest of this season. He will miss Euro 2024 for Italy, and he'll miss, I think, just the start of next season. My view on this, Ayub, is pretty straightforward. There are 2 different points, and I'm keen to hear what your thoughts are. There's 2 different elements to this, as there often is with any difficult case. One is the human being, which is, and I always reiterate, in terms of the mistakes he's made, for sure, there should be an opportunity when it's mistakes like these. There should be the opportunity for kind of, in terms of some form of rehabilitation, some form of kind of working through and what have you, and a second chance. Absolutely. I'm all for it. That's what makes our society. That's the best of what our society has to offer, especially in cases like these, because we all make mistakes. So yourself, myself, and what have you. However, what I've seen with the betting, we can talk about the hypocrisy of kind of governing bodies and what have you, because we see sponsors all the time and what have you. I think that's a different conversation. But what I've seen with the Ivan Toney case, what I saw definitely with the Harry Toffolo case, which I will touch on just briefly, is this kind of very quick sympathy with the players to suggest as though They were, this was pretty harmless. I mean, the rules are very clear. You cannot bet on football games. It's as simple as that, and there's a reason why those rules exist, and it's very simple. And I struggle why people don't appreciate this. If I'm a footballer and I'm betting on games, and all of a sudden I find that I'm on a bit of a losing streak, and I rack up big debts. It comes into question that there's not a bookmaker could come to me and say, right, listen, if you can score an own goal or if you can give a penalty away in this next game, I'll wipe out all your debts. It puts the player in a vulnerable position if you're on a bit of a losing streak because of the decisions the implications of potentially the influence that bookmakers, and we've seen this before in cricket, haven't we, Ayub? And we won't labour the points here, but that's the risk. It brings the integrity of the game into question. Harry Toffolo, for example, he had breaches, Ayub, 375 betting breaches. He was given a 5-month suspended ban. He got a fine of £21,000. And the reason the Independent Regulatory Commission called it, they said that during his time spent at Norwich, his mental health deteriorated because Chris Hughton, A, made it clear to him that he wasn't going to be part of his plans, Chris Hughton, the manager of Norwich at the time, and secondly, he wasn't then allowed to leave the club. So they said that his mental health deteriorated, and with a view to kind of fitting in with the rest of the team and squad that were also betting quite regularly, he was essentially making himself feel better. And again, I have sympathy for those who suffer from mental health and all the rest of it. Again, great deal of sympathy. But I don't understand why the authorities, in my opinion, don't take it more seriously. A 5-month suspended ban for 375 breaches. I argued that Ivan Toney ban was incredibly light, and it's not a deterrent if Ivan Toney, who was pitch training with Brentford anyway, even before his time was up, he's going to be available to play for Brentford in January. In my opinion, Sandro Tonali, it's just my own opinion, he got off very lightly. The rules are very clear. You cannot, and yes, it's the normal arguments that are coming out. He's addicted to gambling and he will do therapy, and I'm good for it. Yes, get yourself better, get yourself well, learn better, do better, improve. All for that, but the rules are very clear, and it makes me think that we've already had 3 cases. Just think about the number of cases we don't know about. And you're telling me, because Harry Toffolo was involved in a few incidents of spot fixing, some of those breaches were some of the games, 40 involving his own team, 15 against his own team, and there were a couple of spot fixing moments. So basically, let's say if you're taking the centre, and this happened, I think Matt Letizia spoke about this many years ago as well. If you're taking the centre and the ball gets played back to the centre back and the centre back boots it out, you could have a bet to say the first throw in will be 6 seconds into the game, and it's things like this. So again, I don't understand why some of the football stakeholders don't take it more seriously. I think it's quite an egregious. The rules are clear. Don't bet. I think it's unfortunately a lot of young men with a lot of money to hand and a lot of spare time. And unfortunately, that's often quite a slippery slope. It's not as if they need the money. So what is happening? So just quick summary for me. I think he got off lightly. I hope he does better, and I hope he gets better. And it's a shame for Newcastle because he was a big signing and he's a great football player. But I think those arguing that the ban is a little harsh, I can't conform to that view.
Whole thing's a bit of a nonsense though, really, isn't it? I mean, it's something that we've talked about before. There's a huge number of betting companies involved in football, top flight football, across the world, not just in the UK, across the world. And this is where the hypocrisy is. If you're really, really hell-bent on eradicating what you consider an ill, just make sure that you make a statement loud and clear that betting has no place in football, whether it's individuals making bets or whether it's betting companies who are involved in sports. So to me, that's where I just can't take it seriously. I cannot take it seriously. And my concern is, I mean, you talked about spot fixing. There are many players who perhaps are betting, but there's many players perhaps who are not betting, but are involved in spot fixing. That's the danger. That is, in my opinion, a concern also. So don't always just target those who are caught betting. There's a number. I mean, in cricket, classic example. We talked about the Pakistani team. They were involved in. They weren't making bets, but they were involved in spot fixing. And in cricket, that's predominantly what happens. Matches are players are contacted. They are paid huge sums of money to make certain things happen during certain times of the game, but they're not betting. So it's not just it's not betting which is the issue. It's obviously guys involved with unscrupulous betting companies. My points on this is I have no issues with players betting. I've got to be honest. Just don't bet on the sport that you play in. Simple as that. If you've got hundreds of thousands that you're earning a week, you can spend it the way that you want. And really, when you have that amount of cash, for the guys that are playing football, they probably are looking at avenues to try and sort of spend past time, because football, for all the comments that coaches make that it's a very busy schedule, they have a lot of downtime. And the problem we live in a world which is you can do online betting. It's not a case of going to the bookmakers. You can do it online. Let them bet. All I would say is, if you're serious, if football is serious about betting, make sure there's no betting company, there's no shirt sponsors with betting companies. That makes a statement loud and clear. If you're not going to do that, let the players bet. They just can't bet on the sport. There's lots of sports Tony could bet on. Doesn't have to do football. He can do it on cricket, tennis, golf, anything. So I have no issues.
He probably was.
Let's see. Yeah.
But let's see. I mean, look, I hear you loud and clear. I actually think they're not taking it seriously. That's my point. I think when I always think punishments will often tell you how serious the authorities take it. And these punishments are powder puff at best. I mean, Ivan Toney, let's not forget, I think he got a fine of, what was it, 50,000 or whatever it was, a 10-game ban. Now, some might say, I'm not saying we should banish him forever. Of course not. I'm just saying, for me, the punishment didn't fit the crime. And I thought the crime was quite egregious. And somehow through that all, the players managed to evoke quite a lot of sympathy along the way. He was classed as a gambling addict, same with Harry Toffolo. And look, Sandro Tonali will go through therapy, which he'll perform in Italy, and he'll talk about his experiences, and hopefully, and many of the great influences of our time speak from past experience in terms of some of the wrong turns that they took. Right. Famously in America, just a very quick example, American football, Michael Vick, involved in a dogfighting ring, spent a bit of time in jail. This was at the height of his fame in the National Football League in American football, spent a couple of years in prison, now has done great work for kind of dog charities and what have you. So there are examples of people who make mistakes and then go on to do kind of great things in terms of their contributions to society and communities and what have you. Currently, I don't think football takes it that seriously. Think about some of the incidents, Ayub, that we've not heard about in terms of its conclusions. There was Granit Xhaka, who was investigated about a potential yellow card situation whilst playing for Arsenal. Lucas Paqueta's Man City move got scuppered because of some betting investigation in terms of yellow cards. Again, we've not heard too much of that. I'm interested to see what comes off the back of that, or whether there will be some discussion. So let's see. Again, it's just something that I wanted to comment on, because I think we'll see more and more cases of this.
I mean, it's an interesting topic. Not everybody is enamored with this topic, but certainly it's something that interests me. I know it interests you. But right, let's move on to football. The weekend. There's only one place to go. It's the Manchester derby. I've got my own thoughts, but I'd like to hear your thoughts first, and if you can tell the viewers, what do you think is going to happen at the weekend?
The Manchester derby, it's a big one, isn't it? And Manchester United are probably quite fortunate that they go into this game off the back of, I think, 3 Premier League wins in 4, right? If you remember so the last game out, they beat Sheffield United. I'm talking about the Premier League. They beat Sheffield United, Diogo Dalot with a fantastic winner against Sheffield United. But they've obviously and they beat Burnley, and there was one other game that will come to me, but they obviously lost at home to Palace. So they got 3 out of 4 wins. Midweek in Champions League, boy oh boy, they made hard work of that with a penalty save at the end. If Copenhagen score there, I think that's the Champions League hope probably done and dusted. So having to have a penalty save in the very last embers of the game tell you that United are scratching around right now in terms of form, continuity, in terms of feel-good factor and what have you. Manchester City, on the other hand, obviously back to winning ways after a couple of Premier League back-to-back defeats against Wolves and Arsenal. So they beat Brighton last time out. Fairly comfortable in the Champions League against young boys in the end. Haaland back to scoring in the Champions League. So there was some bit of noise about the big man's drought, but I wouldn't mind his goal drought, if that's what they call it. I think in the end, I think it's a big game for both teams, isn't it, in terms of the way the league's constructed right now. Man United need a win to give them. They've not had. I mean, we're about to enter November. The clocks are about to go back, and they've not had one decent performance. And that is again testament to the fact that they've just had a very scratchy. They've had so many issues this season. There's some talk about David De Gea potentially coming back in January, which I found incredible news, with Onana potentially going to AFCON and what have you. So let's see. I think it's a big game for both teams, genuinely. I can't see who it would mean more. I think for United to beat their Manchester rivals would be massive. I think they're at home. I think it's at Old Trafford. Obviously, the passing of Sir Bobby Charlton. So it'll be quite a emotional affair. In terms of, and I'm sure they've got some kind of not ceremony, but some sort of kind of tribute planned and what have you with the two Manchester clubs in terms of his influence on not just Manchester United, but the city of Manchester as well. So big game, I think, for City. They don't quite look as free-flowing just in recent times. There's a few little issues with selection in terms of, obviously, Grealish played midweek, but he's probably going to go back to Doku, you would think. I think they need Kevin De Bruyne back soon. Rodri helped, of course he does. He's an incredible footballer, but it's a very difficult one for me to predict. I think City will just edge it. I think they've got the big man up front, and I think United they're just not. I mean, if they've not had one thoroughly good 95-minute performance against any of the teams that they've played so far. Now, yes, you'd expect them to raise their levels, but now you're going up against the best team in Europe. So you'd expect City to create some opportunities. The question is, will City be a bit more attacking and a bit more, let's say, lively, or are they going to play a very controlled, methodical way of playing? Because I think Man United, although they'll probably have much less possession, probably won't mind that in terms of opening up the opportunities on the counter-attack, and that's how they have troubled Man City in the past. So I think City need to probably just go for it a little bit more. I think in terms of trying to actually create opportunities and create goal-scoring opportunities rather than really kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts, so to speak, in terms of just passes and lots of control. So it'll be very interesting. I'm going to give City the edge, and I think they will just get the job done, just because I think it's difficult for me to have confidence in Man United when I've not seen it so far. That's not to say they can't raise their levels, but I think this might just be a step too far against the best team in Europe.
Well, that's your thoughts. My thoughts. I hope United get absolutely smashed, but there is a reason for it. One is obviously I don't like United.
That's news to me.
Yeah, but also I think they've got away with murder this season. Really have. Some of the results, we talk about right at the start of the season, Wolves, that was such an unfortunate result for Wolves. I think Brentford as well, they were losing 1-0 right up until the fag end of the game to get 2 goals.
Yeah, that was
it's all of these sort of scrappy results. And I think maybe somebody just needs to absolutely smash them. And maybe they'll actually realise that there is a major problem at Manchester United. There's something not quite right. I mean, at the moment, it's just these wins are papering over really wide cracks. And I don't know. I mean, if I was a United fan, it's always that case, isn't it? As a fan, you want your team to win, but sometimes you almost want to reset, and sometimes only a massive win or a massive loss sort of allows you to be in that position. So I think if they absolutely get hammered, then maybe some of the United fans might just think, "Hang on, look, we've been blind." Yeah, go on.
Sorry to interrupt, but how often are they just going to reset? You can't just keep resetting.
I don't think they've reset at all, really. I mean, well, since Ten Hag's been here, we absolutely waxed lyrical initially at his management, his ability to try and sort of resurrect the football club, but it was a false dawn. I really think this club is still quite stagnant. I don't think he's really made any massive improvements. I think they're a little bit more stable than they perhaps were, but still, I think it's a club that is dramatically underachieving. They've spent again quite a bit of money. I mean, they spent 40 million on a keeper, and now you've just mentioned that I know it's all to do with the Africans Cup, but I think if you ask a lot of fans, they're probably turning around and say we should have kept De Gea. This guy is, oh yeah, he saved a penalty, yes, but it's unless they've been fed dud information about his ability to with his feet, because I've seen nothing with this guy. This guy certainly can't keep. I'm still questioning.
A bit harsh. He's a bit harsh.
I still question how good he is at distribution. I mean, it's and Hoyland, I think, yes, he's got potential, but there's a lot of players there that have nowhere near played the potential or ability. So I hope City absolutely got to town. The big man, Haaland, scores 5 goals. So
what is wrong with you?
So
it's a big one, isn't it? And you're right. You pointed out the game that I couldn't recollect. The Brentford one was the one I was thinking about. So they beat Burnley, Brentford, and Sheffield United, and lost to Palace at home in that 4-game stretch. And Burnley was a scratchy game with not much in it. Obviously, a game settled by Fernandez's great goal, and then the Brentford one. I mean, 2 injury time goals to turn that game around by Scott McTominay. I mean, just imagine if they were going off the back of, let's say, in those 4 games, 2 wins, 2 losses, and then going into the City game. I mean, they've given themselves a bit of a shot in terms of three wins out of 4. Could have been a lot worse. And to your point, they've not performed in a way where if they had the points that they've got right now, but yet they were kind of being the dominant team for the most part, being just a little unlucky, you'd think, well, there's going to be a regression to the mean. The worry for Manchester United fans will be, to your point, they've been very sketchy this season in terms of performance. And rather than take a step forward, they've taken a step back. And that would be the worry for Manchester United fans. You see Chelsea, I'm not saying they are over any of their issues. You saw some of their kind of challenges in the game against Arsenal in terms of closing it out, still coming to fruition that they're planning and what have you. But you see Spurs, they look a different team under their new manager. You see Liverpool again, a resurgent Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal probably still haven't hit top gear, and yet they're right there as well. So interesting. Do I think United can improve? Yes. But you need to start seeing it at some point. It'll be very interesting to see if they can stomach a performance like Arsenal did against the champions in terms of application, commitment, or is this going to be one of those kind of dire 2-0 away wins for City? Fairly controlled, fairly comfortable. And I think the Manchester United fans want a little bit of emotion, want a little bit of kind of commitment and application. They're going to be under pressure. They're playing the best team. They're playing the champions of Europe. But in the same way, these games can go one or two ways, right? Ayub, when you mentioned it, a big win, and all of a sudden things are looking good. You've got the toughest fixture out of the way, let's say, or one of the 2 toughest fixtures, the games against Manchester City, and then you're thinking, 4 wins out of 5 in the league, and we go on. Similarly, you take a big defeat or a defeat, and it just continues to pile on, right, in terms of the negativity. So I think City will just edge it. What's your prediction?
City will win comfortably. I really do. I think the luck's going to run out. They've had lots of luck last few weeks. It can't continue, surely not. So I predict about 4-1 Manchester City.
Goodness.
I ain't holding back. Right, that's the big game at the weekend. But it's also another big game. As you know, I have an obsession with the bottom of the table. We talked about...
it's not a healthy obsession, but go on.
It's not, but it's a realistic expectation that I have. So we had a big game, Bournemouth Wolves last week. And it was a great moment for Gary O'Neill against his old club. The pressure's on Iraola. I still think he's safe. I think they've invested too much in this coach just to get rid of him, especially the way that they sort of removed Gary O'Neill. So but there is a game this weekend which I think is even more massive now. It's Bournemouth versus Burnley. It's I consider it a mouth-watering fixture. There's a lot at stake. There really is a lot at stake. And again, it could be one of those games where if Burnley win, I think they stay up. If Bournemouth win, obviously gives them a great opportunity to try and get out of the bottom three, which they seem to be stuck in at the moment. So if Bournemouth lose, do you think Iraola will be sacked?
It's not my brand, you to predict these things. I'll leave that to you for kind of swinging wild, as you would say. Again, just to reiterate, I think I'm sure he's a half decent coach, and sometimes the timing just doesn't align, right? Ayub, it all depends whether Bournemouth owners get fidgety and whether they get shifty in terms of hang on. What does this mean in terms of potentially staying up this season? I cannot for the life of me understand why they ever shifted the expectation this season in terms of trying to, kind of push for being comfortable. They were always going to find it difficult. So to put yourself in a position where it's a new manager who doesn't know the league, I find that quite shocking, to be honest with you. I would have stuck with Gary O'Neill simply because better the devil you know, and he knows the league, he knows the players, he understands the club temperament. Anyway, we've gone over that multiple times. I think it's a difficult one. I mean, if Burnley win, I guess a lot depends on Luton. There's some talk obviously about the Everton FFP situation, so that will be playing into the minds of many owners, right? If the rumours are to be believed that the Premier League are pushing for a 12-point deduction for Everton, I mean that's going to put Everton. I was going to use the phrase behind the eight ball, but that's really going to put them behind the eight ball because that will be -5 for them. And I mean, that's going to be difficult to come back from, Ayub, right? So let's see. So I think there's a lot of that at play here in terms of it's not as simple as, oh, this is a 6-point, and if you don't win, you're going to get fired. Are you with me? I think there's some variables here which the owners will be paying attention to. No doubt, many of the teams, especially, I think just on that Everton point, there'll be teams at the bottom of the table, but also some teams at the top of the table because of this Manchester City kind of impending situation. That will be hoping for a severe treatment, let's say, of Everton, because I think that will have some potential impact down the road for when this Manchester City cases are heard. So let's see what happens. No doubt many of Everton's rivals will be pushing for the strongest possible penalty. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. So I think that will play a part of you in terms of what the outcomes are of that. So they may just wait to see what happens there. They'll want to give him every chance, won't they, Ayub? They've not got much equity in the manager in the sense that they've not had to pay a release fee or what have you. Remember, he came on a free contract. Of course, you'd have to pay him out for his remainder of his contract. It just depends whether they think he's still able to get a tune out of these players. So you're right, Burnley, big game. It's at home. Don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they need a win, right? It's not even a performance. They just need a win. It's against one of your relegation rivals. Difficult one to predict, honestly. I think a score draw is probably the best bet. Don't fancy any team keeping a clean sheet. So I think even a point wouldn't be the worst result because it's a point, and a point down there right now is a point well earned. So huge game. And I think you're right in terms of perhaps games of the week. That's probably the second one after the Manchester derby because of the potential implications for both clubs, because Burnley also very much need the points.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It's an important game for Burnley as well. And I think Vincent Kompany, he's built up a lot of credit. He's considered a really exciting manager, really exciting coach. But in terms of the Premier League, this is not a league where it's by any stretch of the imagination, one where even if you're somebody with a good reputation, you're going to hit the ground running. You really need results. So it's a key game. It's a crucial game because, again, games that you're playing against teams that are going to be fighting with you at the bottom are absolutely pivotal in your survival, because once this game is done, then I think Bournemouth have quite a hard run of fixtures, same with Burnley to a certain extent. So really, you look at, right, this is a game where we got to win points, because for the next 5 games, we'll be lucky if we get 1 point. So it's a huge amount of pressure on both teams. And I think if Burnley do happen to win, it will I think give them tremendous confidence. The gap, I'm not sure what the gap is between the two teams at the moment. I think 1 point, 2 point, but whatever it is, at least
It's a
a
point.
gap of, is it a point? But at the bottom, a gap of 4 points maybe is 5 games. So that's why I always look at it. I think the experiences of being a Leeds fan at the bottom, that's what it taught me, that it's not like the Championship where you can go on a run of 6 games, win 6 games, that's 18 points. Here at the bottom, it really is. It's you a point is gold dust. And it takes you a tremendous amount of work and effort to get that point. So really, if you can get 3 points against a relegation rival, it is a tremendous fillip for the confidence. So massive game. Looking forward to it. Excited by it. I hope Burnley just pinch it for Georgie's sake as well, because Georgie's getting quite desperate now. I was speaking to him today, and he predicted. I think he was sort of saying about 7 points that he was in the game before last.
Mm-hmm.
He goes in the next 3 games we'll get 7 points. So they started off with 0 in the last game. So he's saying we'll get 6 points. So he's expecting 2 wins this win, and I think they play Palace. So
I don't think George, with the greatest of respect, I don't think you need to be thinking about 2 wins. Let's just
he's
focus on getting 1 win.
Yeah, I think he's. I mean, I was always very negative as a Leeds fan. He seems to be overly positive.
Yeah,
So
talking about winning streaks.
yeah, which in the Premier League, if you win 2 games as a team at the bottom, that's a streak.
Yeah, you're safe.
Right. Yeah. So that's the 2 feature games that we've got. But any other games that are catching your eye?
Obviously, Arsenal fans, so home to Sheffield United, you'd hope that they can be solid professional. Sheffield United haven't won yet in the Premier League. I do think Jesus will miss. There's been some pictures of him in crutches, but again, Arsenal, just as an Arsenal fan, you'd hope that they can get a win there. Liverpool home to Forest should be relatively comfortable. I'll be just keeping a slight eye on Brighton against Fulham, and then keen to just hear your thoughts. I think it is Brighton against Fulham this weekend. Fulham is a team that I'm just keeping my eye on. Bit of a tepid performance against Spurs on Monday night. A team just to keep an eye on in terms of whether or not they've got the goals to stave off a potential relegation scare. I mean, it's a cliche, but there's a team that always kind of gets dragged in where you thought, oh, didn't really expect that. And I think Fulham just could be that type of team. Obviously, Mitrovic left for pastures new. Brighton need a win as well. They've been a little bit hit and miss recently. Obviously, draw at home. Tough games, but draw at home to Liverpool, away to City lost, even though they fought back well to get a bit of a consolation, make the last 10, 15 minutes a little nervy. But that'll be just an interesting game to keep an eye on. I think Fulham is just one of those teams right now. They don't fill me with a great deal of confidence in terms of the identity and style. And I think in January, I think the coach will be looking to see if he can pick up somebody who's going to score a few goals for them. So it'll be a game that I'll just be keeping an eye on. What any games that you're kind of keen to?
No. I mean, the game that I'm looking out for is the Bournemouth-Burnley game. Other games, I mean, it's apart from the Manchester derby, there's a lot of what you consider predictable games where you're almost preempting the result, but you never know. This is the Premier League. But just on a quick one before we wrap up the show, Silva, has he not just been given a contract extension? Or did I sort of not read that? I'm sure I read somewhere.
Well, I
which
think
surprised me, really surprised me, if that is the case.
Yeah, but if it is the case, I mean, for me, it wouldn't surprise me. If you remember, he was coveted by the Saudi Pro League, wasn't he? So I could make sense of it as to why he would be rewarded with a contract that would help alleviate some of that financial gap, let's say, that he would have got if he went to the Saudi Pro League. And I think, look, he's, in my opinion, he's deserving of a contract. I think Fulham have done well in the Premier League under his stewardship, and I think he's a bright young manager after difficult times at Everton, I think at Watford as well, right? So, look, I think that's what all that is about. If you remember, the similar thing happened with Palhinha. He's on the flight to Bayern Munich, and that gets pulled, and before you know it, he's got a contract as well. So I think this is the new norm for contracts. Happened with Caicedo in January, if you remember, when Arsenal were pushing and Chelsea were pushing, and you get a contract because it's how the clubs are operating now in terms of release clauses and safeguarding their investments. So yeah,
it is true. Yeah, he's signed a new contract, so it's until 2026.
Yeah, doesn't mean he won't be walking come January or what have you, but he needs he needs he needs to get Fulham winning. I mean, there's worse teams than them, granted, but you have to earn it in this league. So
Absolutely.
just need to be careful.
And right, that is a wrap for today's show. So let me do the housekeeping. So subscribe if you haven't, smash a like, share with your friends, drop in a comment if you've got any comments either about the Salah story, about Premier League, about the betting, anything that you want. Okay, and I think somewhere here is the Just Onside Twitter handle. Even though it's X, I'm going to carry on calling it Twitter.
The Twitter handle's on the right hand side of you, but
is it this side? So it depends.
No,
just
just below you would be the subscribe button. Are you?
Subscribe? Is that what it is? So, but you know, when you watch it, you know there's a couple of buttons there. Make sure that you do. All right. Okay. So as always, terrific. Thanks always for your contribution. As always, terrific to have your support. And until the next time, stay on side.